All right. Thanks, Andrew. I know that's a funny introduction. I'm from a pre-Tinder era. I was fortunate to meet my wife on Twitter. We were introduced by someone. And a few years later, we got married, and we've been working in the same company for several years now. Thanks, Andrew, again for inviting me here, Andrew and Aaron, to speak on this slightly controversial topic of social media ROI. And it's a funny thing, you know. There are some people who are always obsessed with ROI, and then there are others who try to avoid the question. Fortunately or unfortunately, I've been on both sides of the table in the last 15 years or so. But I know I'm standing between you and lunch, so I'll try to keep it interesting. Let's start with the question, you know. What gets you excited about social media? It's been around for pretty much maybe 2 decades now. All of us have seen it, used it in our personal capacity. Some of you would have used it for businesses, lead generation, all of that. But what gets you excited about it? It's constantly changing and evolving, sure. Yes, madam?
That it's open and you can find anybody you want to talk to and find a bit about them and find ways to approach them.
Interesting. Yes. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am?
You always find answers to my questions.
You always find answers to your questions. Great, yes. All right, so all of that is a valid answer. As an individual, social media has changed the way I interact on the internet, right? I mean, internet existed even before social media did. So we've been sending emails, we've been doing stuff on the internet for longer than social media has existed. But what changed with social media? Because this session is about businesses, from a brand perspective, from a business perspective, how I look at it is, for the first time in the history, social media has made brands to engage with their customers, prospects, in a way that had never been done before. From the consumer side, it's the first time that we as individuals can sort of explain or share our views about the product or service we used openly on the internet. And the brands today care about it. They would respond to you. So that, I think, is a fundamental change that this medium has brought to businesses and us as marketers. And here's some interesting stats. You know, we see them day in, day out, but then come to think of it, more than 800 million users like something on Facebook every single day. That's a huge number. 70% of teenagers, they've started trusting YouTube influencers. I was here yesterday and there was a session on influencers, micro-influencers, right? So these YouTube influencers are pretty much micro-influencers, they're not celebrities. And then 70% of teenagers trust them today. 3/4 of Twitter users say that they use Twitter to read news. I got off the TV 10 years ago. I have no TV in my house. I mean, the TV subscription. I use my television, the system, to probably use Netflix and all of that. But then traditional TV, I don't read newspapers. But then Twitter as a feed is very real time, very informative. So this is from the personal context. Now think of how brands can use all of this. And of course, cat photos, right? I'm no kidding. How many of you love cats here in the room? Okay, quite a few. I love cats. And then, did you know that 15% of the internet traffic today is related to cats? And about 6.5 billion cat photos exist on the internet. And then over 2 million videos on YouTube alone, cat videos, right? But then, in all of this, I know the big question still exists. But what's the ROI of being there? in my previous role, I was running an agency in India, and we used to work with clients like Samsung, Maruti Suzuki, Aircel, and a bunch of others. And this was a question that kept coming. I'm talking about 2008. It's been 10 years since then. All right? So we'll talk about that today. A quick background of myself. I lead product marketing at Zoho. We are a business software company in a B2B SaaS space, and we make software for businesses. Everything from a CRM and email to social media tool to your HR, invoices, all of that. These are my contacts. I would love to connect with you guys later. If you have any specific suggestions, feedback, discussions, I'm always open to conversations. Prior to that, I had my own agency, like I said, back in New Delhi, India. And that role transitioned into a product marketing role in 2012. Speaking of ROI, this is my favorite quote from Peter Drucker. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And over the years, we're sort of obsessed with measurement. All of us are. I mean, at some point in time, we want to measure things, right? In fact, in a recent survey, over 40% of CMOs said they haven't been able to measure the impact of social media on their business, though they've been doing social media in some form actively, be it from a social media marketing standpoint, social media customer surveys, social recruitment, all of that. And you would have seen similar stats over the last several years, right? There are X percentage of people are not sure where the money is going, or what should they expect from social media, are they in the right direction, and all of that. But the thing is, what's the obsession about? Why is this obsession about ROI that exists with marketers, with businesses, right? Well, it gets you a promotion to begin with, right? And I'm not kidding. I was just reading this article the other day, and this is a screenshot from that article. Somebody had put this up, quite a clickbait, I should say. But 4 ROI formulas that will help you earn a promotion, right? And this is the formula that it had. So I think the talk is now over. So you got the formula. I should probably get to the lunch, right? I mean, it does look that easy. I mean, you know, it's a straightforward formula. You subtract the expenses from your revenue, and then, you know, and it's a number. The point is, it's not. It's not a straightforward formula that can help you get an ROI. All right? You wish it was that easy, but it's not. Instead, what happens is, we often forget, or we often don't start with the right question. Think of this. This is a Google Chrome ad. What's the ROI of this newspaper ad? You know, how would Google measure? What's the ROI? How do you put that same formula for this ad campaign that Google did, or somebody else who does it? Or, what's the ROI of these billboards at the Times Square, or anywhere else for that matter? Similarly, what's the ROI of a TV ad that we see? How do you measure that? Right? How do you know, what number of customers or leads did you get from a TV ad? Or let's just say, what's the ROI of being here at this event? Right? So these questions keep coming up. You know, we always think about, when you're doing something, what's the ROI? But then the interesting part is, ROI means different things to different people. I know that sounds confusing, but I'll explain. What's the ROI of a guitar? How many of you love to play guitar, or would love to play a guitar, but don't know how to play one? All right, there are people in the room who love to play guitar. So what's the ROI of a guitar? Well, for this guy, how many of you know him? Yes. So for Eric Clapton, the ROI is probably $250 million. Right? Yeah. 18 Grammy Awards, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, all of that. even for this street artist, the ROI of the guitar is probably quite a lot. And that's my guitar. ROI? 0. I never figured it out. I could never learn it, you know. So the same guitar, the ROI for me is 0, right? Because it means different things to different people, you know. We often start wrong because we start talking about ROI without even realizing what's the objective. Just last night, I was sitting outside the hotel. I'm staying upstairs here, and I met a gentleman who was probably jet lagged like I was. And he's not part of this conference. He works in oil and gas industry. And we just struck a conversation, and it came up. And he said, it's very hard for us. We do social media, we do digital marketing, but as an oil and gas company, ROI is very hard. I said, you should buy the ticket for tomorrow's conference, probably. You know? But then, it was an interesting conversation at 2 a.m. last night. The problem was, as a B2B company, and that to a very niche oil and gas, which is traditionally not looked at as a very digital savvy company, it's harder to justify. But then, the conversation extended to, what is it that you're looking for on social media? What's your objective, right? And objectives could be many, you know. We'll look at that in a simple framework that I've put up for all of us here to set the course right to get to ROI. The simple framework consists of a strategy, a process that we get to follow to get there, and of course some set of tools. So start with, I would say, start with the first thing, which is, what's the objective? What are you trying to achieve when you're on social media? I know the question itself is not very clear, but the next slide, you would see how we translate our objectives into the KPIs or deliverables, right? So every social media activity, campaign, or whatever you do, link it to the objective that you start with. That's the first mistake that most of us do, you know, especially early on when we get into social media and the business is in an industry where social is cool, but we don't know how to go about it. So start with an objective, okay? And then define your KPIs for that objective. So the first point is, you know what you're trying to achieve, and then you have certain benchmarks, certain metrics to sort of define that, okay, this would show that I'm actually moving the right direction. And speaking of objectives, there could be many, you know. Social media ROI is not just about revenue. You know, that's, of course, the sling is the last stage to it. But brands do social media for awareness, for branding, traffic, leads, impressions, all of that. And it doesn't really mean, if you're in the social media space doing a great campaign, everything doesn't really translate into ROI immediately. I mean, do you think a brand like Coke or Pepsi need to do social media to sort of sell a can of Coke? No, it's more for the connect. It's more for the emotional connect with their audience. And we've had a couple of sessions about that yesterday and today, about how social media is all about storytelling, all about putting up your brand there so that people connect with them. And people love to buy from other people. There's nothing called B2B communication different from B2C, because people who are part of businesses are also human beings. So you're always selling to a human being, right? So that's what brands are realizing, and thanks to social media, that's sort of aggressing very fast now. B2B marketers realize that they have to tell a story, they have to connect with brands, no matter what your objective is. And then once you've defined your objective, let's say your objective is awareness, right? And in terms of then KPI, you're looking at impressions and engagement on your piece of content that you're putting up. If your objective is website visits, let's say you run let's say coffee shop, okay? It's a mom and pop coffee shop, you make great coffee, but you're not as big as Starbucks, for example, right? So you want people to come to your website. You probably also sell some merchandise or designed coffee cups or whatever you're doing. So in that case, your website visit is the objective, and the KPI then becomes link clicks, page views, what's your bounce rate, things like that. And they are all measurable, by the way, right? If your objective is social sales, like social selling is pretty cool. I mean, it's been there for 5 years. Social selling, social CRM, there's a lot of buzzword around that. And if social selling is what you're looking for, then of course, you can track your leads, conversions, revenue. If you use a CRM, and if your social tool talks to your CRM, you can connect all of that. The next is align your social strategy with objectives and KPIs. So what does that mean? Let's say your objective is to create awareness. Now with that, one of the examples here is, as a B2B company, you would create value-based content, and augment it with social advertising strategy to get more impressions. I'll translate that a bit. Let's say I'm part of a B2B SaaS software company, okay? We are not selling Coke, Pepsi, or a pair of shoes. What we are selling is a service, a software. So why do people visit us, or why would people buy from us, That's where value-based content comes into picture. And that's where you've heard of white papers, e-books, all of that working well. Because when you offer something that adds value, people come back to you over and over again. And when they are ready to buy that piece of technology or software, they would remember you. You would be on top of their minds. So that's what value-based content strategy is. And then your social media strategy revolves around that kind of content strategy. I mean, if you look at a social network like Facebook or Twitter, if you ever set up an ad campaign on any of these networks, and the interface you see, the first thing is they ask your objective. Is it a awareness? Is it a lead generation? What kind of objective do you have? And they optimize the campaign basis that. Because objective is where it starts, and we often mistake objective with something that we want to do which we don't know what we're going to do. We want to be on social media for everything, and that's not how it works. If your objective is website visits, then you're optimizing your social campaigns for link clicks and not engagement. Like if you want to send people to your website, engagement is good. Like somebody comments on your Facebook post is nice, but then you actually want them to go to your website. So your objective is different from engagement in that case, right? So it's important to align your social strategy with the objective that you may have. And the third part is identify tools that work for you. Again, I represent a company that makes software, which are tools essentially to get work done. But when people ask me, okay, which is the best tool that you recommend to do X? My answer always is the best tool is the one that works for you. Okay, the tool that works for me might not work for you. So I don't advocate a tool. I have changed so many tools in several years to get things done, and be it something as simple as a task manager or a social media tool or whatever. But let's look at a couple of them, which are pretty standard, I would say. When you look for a tool, look for one that talks to your CRM. If you're looking for a social media marketing tool, choose one that would connect with your CRM. Because if you're serious about ROI, there's no other way you can measure all of your awareness, engagement, lead generation, all of that would it would have to be sort of put together somewhere to connect. And that's your CRM. That's where your leads go. That's where your potentials come in. And that's where you track your revenue that is coming from a source. Next is Google Analytics and UTM codes. All of us as marketers have used it for several years now. And similarly, the social pixels on when you run ads on Facebook, Twitter, they have a similar mechanism like UTM codes that help you track what's going on. So let's look into each of these quickly. The number one thing when you talk about ROI and tools is attribution. If you can attribute an activity or a behavior to the action that is performed, that's when you get clear about, okay, what is the ROI of the activity, right? So attribution is the key. Always remember that when you're talking about measuring an activity, a success of an activity. So the first thing I said was get a social tool that attributes social media with your leads coming in. This screenshot is from Zoho Social, and you can see where you see leads coming in from a particular network, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. You see the name of the lead. You see the potentials created, and so on and so forth. So use a tool that would attribute your social media content strategy and link it to the CRM, because that's how you measure your leads, potentials, and revenue. Next is UTM codes. When you're sharing a piece of URL, a URL for an email campaign, for a banner ad, or whatever, use UTM, because that tells you where did that visitor come from and how did the visitor behave from there on, right? And it could be a specific campaign, post, or an ad. Similarly, in the social pixel context, you run an ad on Facebook, you have a landing page, you put a Facebook pixel, and someone converts on that, the pixel fires, and then you know that lead came in from a Facebook ad that you're running. And interestingly, you can track the visitors even if they did not convert by clicking on it. So if they viewed that piece of ad, they would be attributed to that thing. So you know that your ad campaign that you're running on Facebook, for example, is working for you. And then in the hindsight, it also helps you understand which of your ad campaigns are working better than the others, so you can optimize further on them, right? So that's pretty much it that I could pack up in 30 minutes of the model, the framework that you could use to get to the ROI. It starts with the objective that you're there for, and then put up your content strategy, align it to your objective, have the KPIs very clear, and then use tools, the right set of tools, the ones that work for you, to measure your ROI, right? But today, before I leave this hall, I want to flip the question for everyone in the room who's always been thrown upon this question, be it your clients, be it your boss, be it your whoever who asks you, okay, so what's the ROI of social media? Why should I do that? All right, flip the question today, and let's ask, what's the cost of not having a social media strategy in today's world? When everybody is on social media doing something, depending on what their objective is, let's flip the question and ask ourselves, what if we are not there today as a brand? What's the opportunity cost that we lose on by not being there? Thank you so much, guys.